Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Abracadabra. AKA Citizen Abra, he began his magical days as a Flash villain, first appearing in comics in The Flash issue 128. He's from the future, of course, like most of these guys are, but it's a future where, sadly, magic shows aren't a thing anymore. Yeah, sorry David Blaine, gotta get a new job. He's from the 64th century and technology has become so advanced that pulling a rabbit out of a hat just simply won't cut it anymore. I heard about the time machine powered by M-metal, he just had to get his glittery magician hands on it. It was only capable of one trip, so Abra snuck into the laboratory and shot back in time to the 20th century where magicians were still celebrities, like Chris Angel or David Blaine or David Copperfield or, you know, the other ones. He would use technology from his timeline well beyond what we're capable of and then blow our minds in these magic shows. The shows were going well at first until people got bored, then they were actually more interested in this new statue being built in town, so he figured the next logical way of getting attention was to start stealing things, starting with this fancy new statue. He kept stealing, and he kept stealing after that, and he kept using his future tech to evade capture, so when it comes to magicians, Abracadabra is very committed to the craft, in the future or the past. Number 9. Gore, the God Butcher. The God Butcher will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder sequel, and yes, he is a time-traveling menace as well. He made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. He was born on a planet with no name, which is always a great sign. Gore lost his parents when he was very young, and he was told to pray to these gods, because they would always make things better, these glorious gods. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. Really tragic stuff. So now he's a little bit more than upset at these gods. He wants them to answer or to pay, one of the two. With the all-black Necrosword powers, he heads out for revenge on these gods, but in the past. He would use the Pool of Forever to travel back in time and make these attacks happen. He would use the Pool of Forever to go back in time and then attack all these gods when they were babies, right? So it took different versions of Thor from different timelines just to put a stop to Gore the God Butcher. So with this new Thor movie coming out, including Natalie Portman, Mjolnir, Lady Sif, I feel like it's going to be a cosmic headache and do some time stuff in there as well. But in Taika, we trust. It's kind of like when Rhodey suggested getting rid of Thanos when he was younger by, you know, Gore the God Butcher is basically that mentality, but 10 times worse, and with powers.
Moving on to number 8, Doom 2099. So yes, Dr. Doom is way more villain than anti-hero, but we wanted to include this version of him on this list because it's utterly terrifying. Doom of Earth 928, aka the 2099 alternate reality, is known as All-Father Doom. It's worth noting that this universe is very much a bleak, cynical one. Now, this Doom is technically not Victor, but rather a man who believed himself to be Doom, having awakened in Latveria in the year of 2099. He takes over Latveria and then gradually starts planning on how to take over the rest of the world. So it should be no surprise that he claimed the United States presidency.
And at 7, Zombie Hulk. Marvel Zombies is probably one of the most accessible alternate futures in Marvel Comics, according to multiple people. And I don't think that we need much of an explanation here as to why Zombie Hulk would be scary powerful. Hulk is already a brute with anger issues, but this story takes place in an alternate version of the Marvel Universe called Earth 2149, where all superpowered beings became infected by an extraterrestrial virus which transformed them into zombies. So the Hulk, who already had a passion for smashing, is now hungry for human flesh. Do you see where I'm going with this? On the wiki, his abilities are listed as genius level intellect, superhuman strength, superhuman speed, master combatant, and cosmic powers from when he ate the Silver Surfer and Galactus. But his hobbies also include devouring living flesh, which sounds like the worst dating profile ever, or the best. They even have a section for crimes he's committed, like genocide, cannibalism, and more. I wish they had that section on Tinder. That'd make things interesting.
Moving on to number 6, Magus. Magus is quite literally the definition of an evil future alternate version of a hero. That hero is Adam Warlock. Now Warlock, arguably one of the most noble individuals in the 616 Marvel Universe, has an evil future version who first appeared in 1975 in Strange Tales issue 178. He hails from Earth 7528, born of Chaos and Order's efforts to create a champion of life to oppose Thanos, who was the champion of death. He would found something called the Universal Church of Truth, which the Tyrant expanded into an intergalactic empire through Holy War. Holy war.
Number 5. Superman. John Kent in Future State takes up the mantle of Superman after his father. This also happens after his father left Earth, and many of those who he helped believe that he actually has gone missing, possibly to never return. That's what people think is going on with OG Superman. Well, we skip through the future timeline and Future State with this version of John from this future being shown as a very heroic character. We also see some things that he does in this futuristic timeline that seem, well, not so heroic. Like when he bottled the city of Metropolis. John believed he had no other choice and that this was kind of the most peaceful solution to fixing the problems that the city faced at the time. However, he later is forced to confront the fact that he took away the freedom of the people of Metropolis when he made this choice for them. Future State John Kent is dangerous because he is willing to do whatever it takes to protect the city of Metropolis, which sometimes means taking actions that other heroes like Supergirl find questionable.
Moving on to number 4, Old Man Banner. Old Man Banner definitely falls into the disturbing category of our list. Old Man Banner is from the same universe as Old Man Logan, and is the primary antagonist of that storyline, or rather, the ultimate boss battle for Logan in it. In that 2008 story, supervillains have taken over the universe and many of the superheroes are dead. Now when that takeover was happening, Wolverine was tricked into believing that the X-Men were all villains, so he attacked them and killed them. When the illusion was lifted, all he saw was their maimed dead corpses, which drove him into seclusion, swearing that he would never unleash his claws again. Fast forward to much later. Logan has kept his promise and has settled down, now with a wife and children. But he is not by any means free. The Hulk actually owns the land that he lives on and is effectively his landlord, and isn't a good one. When Logan can't pay off his debt, he ends up agreeing to take a now blind Hawkeye across the Savage Land. But when he returns, he learns that Banner ordered his family to be killed anyway. So he goes after Banner, who in this universe has been driven mad by gamma radiation, and has had a bunch of inbred children with his cousin, She-Hulk. When the two duke it out, he literally eats Logan, who then unleashes his claws and digs his way out of Banner's stomach, inevitably killing him.
And at 3, Maestro. Speaking of the Hulk, Maestro from the Future Imperfect storyline is actually the version of Hulk present in the Old Man Logan series. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect #1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intelligence and the Hulk's more malevolent personality traits. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed most of the human race, the radiation from the war ended up basically supercharging the Hulk, turning him into an even more powerful version. He then ended up violently interacting with his cousin, She-Hulk, which resulted in the birth of the Hulk gang. Yeah, I know I said I didn't want to get into it, but at this point I kind of have to explain this. This is absolutely terrifying because while Hulk is already a freaking monster, add more radiation, more power, and the destruction of a whole country and Bruce Banner's intelligence, there's certainly something to be scared of. Not only that, but this was in 1992. They ran this story along with the whole Hulk gang thing in 1992. Nobody would do this now, let alone 1992. That just seems like that's insane to me.
And at number 2, Injustice Superman. Injustice Superman is the product of the Joker tricking the Man of Steel into killing his pregnant wife, Lois Lane. As you can imagine, when Clark finds out the truth, he loses it. Not even Batman can stop the Man of Tomorrow from thrusting his fist through the chest of the Joker in one of the most gruesome moments in alternate Superman history. This is the catalyst to the Injustice storyline, a world in which Superman becomes a tyrant, ruling supreme, opposed by a rebellion led by none other than Batman. Believing that he and other metahumans are meant to police the world in order to make it a better place, he goes too far, becoming a racist dictator. It's both an Elseworlds comic tale and the primary plot of 2 Injustice video games, the latter being more impressive than the former, if we're being honest. And last but not least, in at number 1, Maestro Hulk. Maestro Hulk is Hulk at his absolute prime, but insane and completely, totally evil, and arguably one of the biggest threats on this list, because it's a Hulk who not only is immortal and has unlimited power the angrier he gets, but also a Hulk who is cunning and intelligent. Let's backtrack for a hot sec though. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect issue 1 back in 1992, this version of Banner is from Earth 9200, which takes place 100 years into the future after a nuclear war killed off most of Earth's superheroes. The planet is on the brink of extinction, and Hulk has seized control of it. He's been driven mad by the nuclear radiation and is bitter at the world for how he had been treated in the past. That's a deadly combination. He's also stronger than the regular Banner, with the radiation increasing his strength.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Maestro. The Maestro first appeared in Hulk Future Imperfect. Now this is a crazy version of the Hulk, of course from an alternate future, 100 or so years later. Now this is after the world has fallen apart due to a nuclear war, nearly nearly every superhero had been killed off at this point. It was a grim future, that's for sure. Now, radiation was killing off average Joes like us, but for the Hulk, I mean, he just absorbed all of this. He got stronger, and dare I say it, he got smarter. The only way to defeat this older, now bearded Hulk was to go back in time using Doom's time machine and using that first gamma explosion to wipe him off the map so he never existed. I hope we can see this guy in the MCU. He can connect with astral beings, so maybe Strange will have him in some alternate reality in the next Doctor Strange sequel. Fingers crossed, I'm hoping.
And at 9, Gore. Gore, also known as Gore the God Butcher, was born on a planet with no name. Almost every day was spent starving with no food. He was taught to trust in the gods, but they never answered his prayers. At an early age, his mother and father died, leaving Gore to fend for himself, which sucks even if you aren't on the brink of starvation. Years later, he married and fathered some children. However, most of them died. Man, this guy has a great life. Gore's pregnant spouse Aura was also killed during an earthquake, and one by one his children started dying off until he was left with his one son Agar. He lost faith that the gods he was taught to trust even existed, but when he learned that they did in fact exist, he sought to punish them for not saving his family, despite his desperate pleas. Which I guess is an understandable reaction, but if I found out gods like Thor, Odin, and Zeus and Hades actually existed, I wouldn't think that they could hear my prayers. Cause even if they're gods, they're still, in a way, people, right? Plus, a god killer, it's very forward thinking.
Number 8, Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan stays a hero in the future, but only because he doesn't have much other choice, really. Really, all Logan wants to do is live his life without having to think too much of all the deaths of his friends that he's responsible for. Logan in the alternate future of Earth 807128 ends up killing all of his fellow X-Men after being tricked into thinking they were all villains by Mysterio. Not only was he capable of causing all of that death, but further into the future, he goes up against a powerful and horrific villain in his time and reality, facing the head of the Hulk gang and also sort of his landlord, Pappy Banner, aka Old Man Hulk. Something went wrong with Bruce Banner as time went on in this reality, and he basically lost his mind, likely as a result of that gamma radiation affecting him well into his elder years, and not in a good way. Logan ends up being swallowed whole by Hulk, but defeats him in the end by cutting his way out of Old Man Hulk's gut. It's pretty gross.
2. Moving on to number 7, Dark Beast. Dark Beast is a product of the Age of Apocalypse timeline, known as Earth 295. Now, this is an alternate future timeline in which Charles Xavier is dead and Apocalypse managed to take over all of North America. Magneto leads the resistance. He's also shacking up with Rogue, not that it matters, but just to paint a picture for y'all. Anyway, Dark Beast is Hank McCoy, except he is a straight up evil mad scientist. He's a twisted, inhumane, sadistic genius who lacks Xavier's guidance and isn't part of the X-Men. Rather, he works for Apocalypse, becoming one of the most prominent geneticists who devoted his time to creating the fittest of beings for the villain, second to only Mr. Sinister's counterpart, Sinister, who was one of Apocalypse's horsemen. Dark Beast would conduct horrific experiments and eventually found his way into the 616 for a brief period of time, causing quite the stir in that universe.
Number 6, The Fallen One. The Fallen One is a version of Norrin Radd who comes from a very dark future where Thanos wins. He first appeared in issue 15 of Thanos from 2016 in the Thanos wins storyline. While he is pretty swiftly defeated, it is only because those he goes up against are even more deadly than him. And even then, it takes a few issues before the fight against him is actually concluded. So it's not like you're in, you're out. It's not a one and done. It's a few issues. Norrin Radd, aka the Silver Surfer, became the Fallen One after he was imbued with black matter and also boasts, of course, of the power cosmic, in addition to wielding Thor's hammer Mjolnir. He also comes leading the charge of the Annihilation Wave, so he's got a lot going on. He got all this power in the hopes of standing a chance in the final showdown with Thanos as one of the last beings left alive in the universe, one of the final people to actually fight him. Sadly, he does fail, but he still manages to look deadly and badass while doing so. So you gotta give him some points for that.
Halfway through and in number 5, Captain America 3099. Being used as a skin in the game Marvel Future Fight, Captain America 3099 is in essence Captain America, but make it RoboCop. He has a holographic shield that still actually works like a shield, but is probably one of the coolest and weirdest versions of Captain America I've ever seen. It looks really sweet, and I'd love to see someone cosplay this. Maybe I'll be able to grab a piece of acrylic or something and make the shield myself, because you can put the LEDs and stuff. It's dope. But he is, after all, the same old Captain America. So pretty powerful, but not as powerful as some other heroes. But I'm actually serious though, someone needs to make this shield. Whether it's the hacksmith or Odin makes or something, I make this shield, okay? I will happily do my best to get the rest of the costume together, because this is like my next goal.
Number 4, King Thor. King Thor might be one of the most powerful future heroes on this list, but he also is only so deadly and dangerous because he's living in a time where he has to be. King Thor is the alternate future version of Thor from the alternate Earth of 14412. Here Thor goes on to become the Allfather and lives beyond the point where Midgard becomes a lifeless husk as a result of Thor's once more again villainous brother Loki, the god of mischief. At one point while battling Doom in the future, King Thor is granted the Phoenix Force by Logan, who is currently bonded to it at that time, and is able to use that power to defeat Doom. Considering that King Thor will do whatever it takes to defeat those who would oppose him, and considering how much power he wields, even when he doesn't have the Phoenix Force, I'd say he's a pretty dangerous future hero. I wouldn't want to go up against him.
Moving on to number 3, Genocide. We're going to be talking about a DC character at this number. Genocide, the character. We're not getting that dark today, my friends. Well, maybe a little. Genocide is a pretty morbid character. She was created from the corpse of Wonder Woman in a storyline called Rise of the Olympian after Diana's body was stolen by Ares and then brought back in time during Gail Simone's run on the Wonder Woman series. It gets more grim than that. Ares imbued Wonder Woman's body with energy from soil samples pulled across the globe from places where genocides occurred. So yeah, this includes Auschwitz and Rwanda. And on Genocide's very first encounter with Wonder Woman, she kicked her butt and also stole her lasso of truth. Yikes.
Number 2, Booster Gold. Booster Gold is demonstrably dangerous as a hero from the future, mainly because he has no idea what he's doing. He has tons of knowledge of what is meant to happen in the main continuity and present day that he traveled to from the future, but he has no idea of how messing with the past timeline or anything like that could affect the present day or its future. We see how dangerous he can be when he attempts to even do good, like saving Bruce's parents in the past so that they can be there for his wedding. Unfortunately, in doing so, completely messes with the timeline to the point that Booster is actually forced to travel back in time and make sure that Bruce's parents are killed and that poor young Bruce is basically there to witness their deaths. It's also kind of implied that Booster being there and fixing all of that is actually what caused their deaths. It's pretty crazy, it's pretty trippy. Booster might have some valuable knowledge as someone from the future, but he doesn't have the finesse needed to know when the timeline can be tweaked and when it should be left alone to avoid catastrophes from manifesting in the future. Basically, do not let Booster time travel and mess with the timeline. It is not a good idea. Number 1, Iron Lad. Iron Lad is not specifically from the future, but he does go on to become a very dangerous villain who returns from the future. Iron Lad, who was a member of the Young Avengers, it turns out is actually destined to become Kang the Conqueror, who has many different villainous personas throughout the years. I won't go into them right now, but you know some of them. And he's also known for his time travel antics. He often travels back through to the past from the future to enact all kinds of elaborate plots. As Immortus, he had a hand in creating White Vision. Kang also at one point turns Iron Man evil, brainwashing him into becoming his loyal servant and villainous right-hand man. He's basically behind a lot of evil things that you're like, what is even happening here? And then it'll be like, haha, it was Kang the whole time. Possibly what we'll see in the MCU. I'm placing my bets. Because sadly, I don't think I'm getting Norman Osborn in this phase.
And 10, Spider-Man Reign. I love talking about Spider-Man Reign because honestly, it's pretty damn ridiculous. Spider-Man Reign was Marvel's counter to the Dark Knight Returns storyline from DC. Set 30 years in the future, Peter has retired and Mary Jane is dead. The mayor of New York has taken control of the cities in more ways than just being the mayor, and when JJJ gets Spider-Man back, the mayor releases the Sinister Six from prison, including versions of Electro, Mysterio, Kraven, Sandman, Scorpion, and Hydro Man, as well as a dead Doc Ock tentacle who saves Peter's life after his mask was ripped off in front of a crowd. Doc Ock's final command to his tentacles was to show Peter 3 grave markers, those of Mary Jane, May Parker, and Ben Parker. After being buried in Mary Jane's coffin by Octopus's tentacle and coming face to face with and conquering his inner demons, Peter emerges in his famous red and blue suit, which he had secretly buried with her. Cause yeah. It's also revealed that the mayor, Edward Sachs, is actually Venom, who plans to turn all of New York into an army of symbiotes. But the worst part is when it's revealed that MJ died because of Peter's radioactive swimmers. I guess having a kid with a superhero is a kinda risky business. Give me that episode of Sex Sent Me to the ER. Oh man. And at 9, The Dark Knight Returns. As you can expect when Batman has to, return, Batman was retired and Gotham City had become a haven for all sorts of violent gangs. But before you can say why so serious, the man is back in action and gets yet another new Robin to help clean up the streets of his city. But I know what you're thinking. Batman cannot be street sweeper certified, and you're probably right. But what I mean is he's back to fighting crime. But of course, no alternate universe dystopian Batman story would be complete without a take on the Joker, who still represents the same anarchy threatening to destroy society. I think he's trying to fix it. On the other side though is Superman, a tool of the authoritarian government who wants Batman out of the picture. And as always, it's up to Bruce to find the perfect balance between law and order. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. I love when the superheroes are old though and still try to fight crime. Like I just picture my great grandfather like trying to kick like some thug who's like at his nursing home trying to take his shampoo. Just yeah. That's what I imagine. And at 8, The Ray. Set on an Earth where Germany won World War II, it can make things pretty clear when you're talking about a dystopia. The Ray is a member of the resistance fighting against the German soldiers, and is the primary protagonist of Freedom Fighters The Ray, which is an animated series set in the Arrowverse. The Ray in the crossover at least is shown to be quite powerful, being able to take down Red Tornado from what I can remember. This dude also has like a really cool suit, and in the show is either married to or dating Captain Cold, which is sweet. He gained his powers after the original Ray died in front of him, and he was also included in the comic adaptation of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, which was already adapted from the original comic event, but this one is based off the CW with Felicity and other people. However, the Ray was destroyed along with his Earth in the TV version of the crossover, but in the comics he was killed along with Felicity and Nyssa. This guy has some mad superpowers though, like super strength, flight, light energy blasts, light speed, invisibility, photokinesis allowing him to make solid light constructs, bioluminescence, and that's not even the whole list. Okay, it's freaking nuts, man.
Number 7, Green Lantern. Jessica Cruz from our time might not be quite so dangerous yet, but when we glimpsed into her possible future in the Future State line from DC, we learned that there is a future version of her who becomes a Yellow Lantern, joining the Sinestro Corps. Not all Yellow Lanterns are bad, but because they are generally about instilling fear in others, they more often than not tend to end up becoming deadly supervillains. And that's usually who they are. Jessica Cruz found herself stranded on a Green Lantern base and outpost without her powers, and when Sinestro Corps members showed up to investigate, found herself offered a Yellow Lantern ring after her fight against them had resulted in her overcoming her own fears and instilling fear into the hearts of her enemies. Which I'm not gonna lie, I really like that twist in the future for Jessica. I think Jessica as a Yellow Lantern is really cool.
And at 6, Injustice Flash. But what about a world where Superman was tricked into killing Lois Lane and his unborn son by the Joker who made him hallucinate fighting Doomsday, but then also nukes Metropolis? That's a thing that happened and it was absolutely brutal. So Superman ends up killing the Joker and then gets a taste for it, basically becoming a dictator of the world and then turning it into a dystopia where his word is law. Batman among others obviously fight it, but one of the superheroes who joins Superman is actually the Flash, who is still super fast, but now he works for a totalitarian regime. He does end up defecting, but let's be honest, he's more powerful when he's working with Superman because everyone ends up fearing him. He could shove a vibrating hand through your chest faster than you could say your own name. Just the thought of Superman having a speedster in his corner is enough to make your spine shiver.
In our number 5 spot, Bruce Banner of Earth 9591. So from here on out, we've got quite the selection of Bruce Banner alternates for you all. Starting off with this one from Earth 9591, also known as the Ruins universe. Now for context, Ruins is a 1995 limited series that follows a former Daily Bugle reporter named Phil Sheldon as he navigates a dystopian alternate reality in which, according to him, I quote, "everything that can go wrong will go wrong." Now in comparison to the 616, it is a reality filled with experiments and accidents that resulted in painful deaths and horrible deformities rather than individuals with superpowers. This version of Banner is no exception. He was horrifically mutated after saving Rick Jones during the Gamma Bomb experimentation that would normally give him his powers. On this much more realism-inspired Earth, the exposure transformed him into a mass of pulsating green tumors. He would eventually be captured and held by the CIA, not that it would improve his existence anymore though. And if that doesn't freak you out, the description of this Banner via Rick Jones describing his transformation likely will. I quote, "It hurt to look at him. His skin went black and dry and cracked, and light shone out of him, like all his meat was on fire. Then he started to swell, and then the tumors broke him open." I mean, when someone describes you as all of your meat was on fire, something to be worried about.
In at 4, Old Man Logan. The dystopia in Old Man Logan is about as screwed up as it gets. It was, after all, the inspiration behind the Logan movie, if you didn't already know. The original comic run of this story was all about Logan and a blind Hawkeye traveling across a country that had been completely conquered by supervillains. Those villains included the Abomination, Magneto, Doctor Doom, and Red Skull. The other villains that appear also include a venomized T-Rex. No, I'm not kidding. And the Hulk gang, which is a whole other can of worms I don't really want to get into. Eventually though, Hulk and Logan have one final face-off, toe-to-toe, shot for shot, and Logan ends up decapitating the Hulk and then is on his way, finding a new sense of purpose, wanting to take the country back from the supervillains who took control. Which is a noble yet probably lost cause, because let's be honest, would he really have won in that scenario? I don't think so.
Number 3, Cosmic Ghost Rider. I would say Cosmic Ghost Rider is one of the most dangerous heroes on this list because he's not entirely mentally stable, which also makes him a lot more unpredictable. Cosmic Ghost Rider was originally Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. When Thanos attacked Earth, Frank made a deal with Mephisto, following his death, to become a spirit of vengeance, a Ghost Rider, so that he could return to Earth and get revenge on Thanos for all of the people on Earth that he had killed. However, by the time Frank returned to Earth, there was basically nothing left to avenge, and Thanos had already left, leaving the planet empty and desolate. Frank wandered as a Ghost Rider for years, and in his solitude, lost his mind. He would go on to become a Herald of Galactus in an attempt to defeat Thanos, but would eventually submit to being Thanos' Herald after realizing that fighting against him was pretty pointless.
Penultimately, in at number 2, Kingdom Come Superman. Yet another world where Lois Lane dies, except this time it's directly at the hands of the Joker, who had flooded the Daily Planet with his own toxin, killing everyone but Lois, who had managed to locate a gas mask. However, she tried to attack the Joker, but then Joker cracks her skull. Superman returns and Lois succumbs to her injuries and dies. As the Joker arrives for his trial though, he's killed by a new superhero called Magog. But then, Magog ends up being acquitted of his charges, which just makes Superman appalled. Because, you know, the public is embracing a killer. But I mean, like, let's be honest, they do that anyway. Already disheartened by the death of Lois Lane, Kal-El abandons his life as Superman and retreats to the Fortress of Solitude, where he spends the next decade. Superman eventually returns to reform the Justice League with the goal of capturing heroes who followed Magog's example and took to killing, which results in many a battle and a nuke targeted towards metahuman genes. But in the end, Superman starts dating Wonder Woman and they end up expecting a child. Hopefully Joker doesn't make you think you're fighting Doomsday. Finally, in at number 1, Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is considered the most powerful superhero in comics because he possesses basically unlimited powers. He debuted in the graphic novel limited series of Watchmen, published in 1986 and 1987, but Manhattan later on became a major player in the DC universe. He was revealed to be responsible for the Flashpoint event, which ended up creating the New 52 timeline in the process, something that removed 10 years of history of DC characters, and he did it on his own. So how could I not include Dr. Manhattan on this list when the Watchmen comic is very dystopian? The dystopia in Watchmen is caused by superheroes who thought that they could save the world but ended up leaving it hollow and broken. And Ozymandias makes another dystopia on top of that, thanks to him thinking that the only way to fix the world would be to destroy it. I still don't get this thought process, but I also totally get this thought process. Like, thinking that the world needs a reset, I understand, but actually trying to reset it is something else entirely.
Starting us off in at number 10, Earth X Namor. We're starting off our list with a future version of a hero that's quite disturbing. We're talking Namor the Submariner on Earth X, also known as Earth 9997, an alternate timeline created by Alex Ross. On Earth X, all ordinary human beings have gained superpowers. It follows some of Marvel's mainstays and how they cope with a world in which superpowers are now commonplace. As you can imagine, their narratives have drastically changed because of this. Namor is one of the many heroes that doesn't have an overly pleasant time in this alternate universe. Thanks to having teamed up with Dr. Doom in the past, he's partially responsible for an event that killed Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch. As you can imagine, this did not bode well with Franklin Richards, who would use his reality-bending powers to punish the Underwater Prince. How so? Well, he made it so that exactly half of Namor's body is constantly on fire when he was above water, scarring his body immensely. Eventually, the curse would be counteracted thanks to a spell via Doctor Strange. Speaking of Earth X, that brings us to our next number, In at 9, Earth X Cable. Cable of Earth 9997 has it even rougher than Namor. He's a literal pool of organic metal. Thanks to the techno-organic virus, Earth X Cable has a pretty gruesome fate. Hidden from the rest of society, planted beneath Magneto's Sentinel City in the Savage Land, the virus has completely taken control of him and has reduced his body to an immobile blob of metal. And it's pretty creepy looking. He's basically an entrapped giant living beneath the Earth.
And at number 8, Bullseye. Bullseye first debuted in 1976 in Daredevil issue 131, and ever since he's proven how lethal of an assassin he can be. While his presence would have any superhero on guard in general, there's a version of him from the future that is arguably even more scary than the Bullseye that we're familiar with in the regular Marvel 616 continuity. This Bullseye is an older version who appeared in Old Man Hawkeye. He's clearly been through the ringer, now boasting cybernetic components on his body, with one bit of tech replacing his left eye and another replacing his right hand. Now in this timeline he works for Red Skull and has been aching to kill a superhero. As he notes, it's been 41 years, 7 months, and 26 days since he's killed his last. Not like he's counting or anything.
Number 7, Ultron. The Avengers Age of Ultron storyline is a lot better than the MCU's version of that. The comic Age of Ultron has better time travel stuff than the movie Endgame does, honestly. I mean, Wolverine goes back in time, he tries to kill Hank Pym so that Ultron's never created, but while he's there he has to talk to other Avengers who are also back in time on a different mission. It's wild, it's a great time. It starts off with New York City in ruins. Spider-Man is zipping around the city, all these heroes are missing or they're dead, and the only way for the city to survive this apocalypse is by offering superheroes to Ultron, who just rules everything. So She-Hulk and Luke Cage are amongst these survivors, and they have the plans basically to just go in willingly, and then once they're inside, they're gonna break everything apart because they're super strong. But then when they get there, it's not even Ultron that's running the show, it's actually Vision. The Vision is being used as a conduit from future Ultron, so he's safe. You can't just go and punch him and then everything's fine. He's in the future, he's safe, he knows what's gonna happen. We're kind of screwed. We can't punch our way out of this. We have Ultron already on top. Ultron is actually barely in this story, funny enough, but the stakes start off raised, so you feel anxious the entire time reading it. It's a great time travel story. Definitely check it out.
And at number 6, Monarch. Moving on to a DC character, let's talk about Monarch. Debuting in 1991, Monarch was an oppressive tyrant from the future, hailing from the year 2030 AD. So his story goes as this: a different fellow, a scientist who is also from the year 2030, is an expert in temporal studies, and he believes that if he travels back to 1991, the moment in time that a certain DC character turned evil and began transitioning towards becoming Monarch, he could prevent the tyrant from ever coming into fruition. Now Monarch has a bit of a confusing history. In DC's Armageddon 2001 crossover, initially Monarch's identity was supposed to be a future version of Captain Atom. But then that didn't happen, and mid-story Monarch's identity was changed after there was a leak about Captain Atom being the character. Instead, his identity was changed to Hawk, aka Hank Hall of Hawk and Dove. But later on down the line, in the Countdown Limited series, that identity was somewhat retconned, returning it to Captain Atom, mainly because of the negative feedback about him being Hawk. And the whereabouts of the Hawk version is currently unknown. The Captain Atom version is considered to be one of the most powerful DC villains in history.
And number 5, Dr. Doom. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 5, Victor Von Doom is the main villain for the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and he's been on the big screen a couple of times, one of which we don't like to talk about. We don't talk about that one. He's a big deal, hence why he's close to being number 1. He's one of the most popular Marvel villains ever. I mean, where to start with this guy? I mean, he fought Mephisto, okay, so he fought the devil, and he also has a pretty wild family history. I mean, his mother, a Latvian woman, liked to get close to demons, maybe a little too close. And then after Victor was born, she would attempt to tap into the demonic powers herself, and her clan wasn't a fan of that. So him and his dad got out of Dodge. We don't want that witch mom in here, no siree. So sadly, his dad froze to death in order to protect him from the cold. So then he figured he'd try this demonic power tapping himself, and then with no luck, he returned to his own brain power and then soon met Reed Richards. Time travel is bound to happen with the brains like him. He traveled back in time using the time platform in Castle Doom, and he went to 2011 AD and got in close with Morgan Le Fay. But thankfully the Fantastic Four showed up like, nope, sorry, guy's a huge dick in the future, don't mind us, we'll just scoop him up and get out of here.
Anyway, in at 4, Master Mold. Master Mold first hit the scene in the X-Men issue 15 in 1965. His primary purpose was to be a portable sentinel creating factory, with robotic sentinels being the ones who hunted down the mutants instead of him. He is without a doubt a scary creation and is way more than a glorified factory, having superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, and durability. He can dish out concussive blasts, plasma discharges, and he can fly and scan mutants. He can also self-repair, speak, and has been equipped with powerful weapons to defend itself. Now, in the Second Coming storyline, Master Mold from the Days of Future Past timeline sends Nimrod Sentinels into the present day via a temporal portal, and these Sentinels are rather beastly. Being the most superior force in that timeline, the robots Master Mold created have devastating effects, and the X-Force find themselves traveling into the future in order to stop it.
Number 3. Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal is to travel back in time to stop this unknown factor amongst the X-Men. Okay, so he comes from this dark future and he goes back in time to change it because something bad happens. There's some bad mutant, okay? But this happens where most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch, and then this one child, Hope Summers, was born, the first mutant born since M-Day. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back in time in the first place. This kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop thinks the only way to save his future is to travel back in time and take out Hope Summers as a child, but he fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating this new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was actually remembered as the villain. So he was the villain in his own story, and he didn't even know it.
Up next, number 2, Electro 2099. This version of Electro from Earth TRN 590 is absolutely terrifying. He operates in the year of 2099 AD, and was an android construction worker. When his bosses were displeased with his work, they decided to give him over to torture experimenters. Now, during these experiments, his obedience chips were burnt out, which made him into a sentient robot. And then a generator gave him the power to conduct electricity, turning him into a supervillain that would then go on to join up with the Sinister Six in that timeline. He is capable of electrokinesis, energy absorption, can inflict hyperacusis, which makes everyday noises much louder and painful, and he can fly. And while those are rather deadly tricks to have up one's sleeve, it's really his aesthetic that lands this android villain towards the top of our list. And finally, in at number 1, Time Trapper. Time Trapper straight up looks like the Grim Reaper. This villain, hailing from DC Comics, first appeared in Wonder Woman issue 101 in 1958 as Time Master. Get it? Time Master. See what you guys did there, DC. His name would be later redefined in Adventure Comics 317 in 1964. So, what does this fellow do? He has vast control over time itself, specifically over future time, and can freeze it, alter it, separate parts of it to create his own pocket dimensions, yet he cannot alter present time events. Now, originally a robed warlord from the very distant future, he commanded a large number of slaves and placed Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor into a diabolical funhouse that consisted of various disasters throughout history. Over the years, he has had some contradictory origin stories come out of the woodwork, but overall, he remains a mysterious and deadly character who is often depicted as a fascist and primarily an enemy of the Legion of Superheroes.
Number 10. Per Dagaton. Per Dagaton was an enemy of the All-Star Squadron, obsessed with time travel after being an assistant to the Time Trust, a group of scientists who developed a time ray to go into the future and find an effective bombing defense for use in World War II. The All-Star Squadron was the United States' premier superhero team during World War II, as President Roosevelt asked all available heroes to unite, but only on the home front so that they wouldn't be influenced by Adolf Hitler's Spear of Destiny. The Justice Society of America finds the aforementioned bomb defense in the future, but it is later sabotaged by Per Dagaton. Later, while he's employed by Project M, he meets a time-traveling robot named Mechanique, who asks for his aid in her new war against the All-Star Squadron. They fail in their attack, and Mechanique's body is destroyed. But Dagaton salvages her head and keeps it at his side, and the two fall in love. Dagaton has time vision, which allows him to know what will happen in the near future, and he is also intangible due to being out of phase with his normal time. Here we see punches from the Flash go right through his intangible body. Hey guys, if you like these videos and you want to see some more, make sure you take a second to hit that like button.
And number 9, the Maestro. Alright, sometimes the future is bright, sometimes the future is imperfect. So seeing our heroes grow up on screen and on the page is a wonderful thing, usually, but what about the other characters like the Hulk living for a very, very long time? You gotta wonder what would happen to a guy like that, what happens to his brain, right? So making his first appearance in a vision in the Incredible Hulk Volume 2 issue 401 The Maestro was the main antagonist in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect, so we gotta talk about it, okay? The story takes place about 100 years in the future after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction, which is kind of where we're heading now, I feel like. Definitely. An alternate future version of the Hulk, the Maestro, had been absorbing all of this nuclear radiation the entire time, and he ended up becoming the strongest thing on the planet, as if he wasn't already a badass before. So that means massive increases in strength and anger, plus the brains of Banner, made him arguably unstoppable. I mean, it's in the future, so clearly unstoppable. And it's terrifying too. I mean, Professor Hulk has to use Dr. Doom's time machine to go ahead in the future in order to defeat him. But the Maestro has tons of experience when it comes to the Hulk, being in the future and all, being the Hulk in the future. So it doesn't go well for Professor Hulk at all. I mean, he gets his neck snapped broken, right? So then the Maestro took him on a tour around the city in order to convince him that his ways were the best. And it was resolved when Professor Hulk brought Maestro back from the future to the moment the Hulk was created. He appeared right next to the gamma bomb test that started it all, and at the same time the Hulk was created, the Maestro was killed. It's like a ha thing. Time's confusing. It's very confusing.
Number 8. Arthur Zarko. Arthur was an evil genius, a scientist from the year 2262 who built a time machine hoping to escape the 23rd century and visit a more primitive period where he would more easily be able to steal some nuclear weapons. One day, Thor is busy helping the military test missiles, and Zarko appears in his time machine, stealing a bomb and escaping into the future. Thor winds up having to follow him to the year 2262 and recover the bomb, defeating the villain and then returning to the present. Later, when Thor has his powers reduced by Odin as punishment for marrying Jane Foster, Loki takes advantage of this opportunity and restores Zarko's memory. Zarko promptly goes back in time to fight Thor and get his vengeance, bringing this mining robot alongside for some extra muscle. Thor is unable to defeat them both and is forced to become Zarko's slave and help him rule back home in the 23rd century. Once Zarko takes control of the central computer of that world, Thor's vow to help Zarko is technically fulfilled, so Thor quickly dispatches him now that he doesn't have a robot protector, and then returns to his own time. And Odin, having witnessed all this, returns Thor to his full strength.
Moving on to number 7, Immortus. Putting Immortus on this list is kind of cheating. He's actually a future version of another villain on this list who comes from the future and is a time traveler, aka Kang the Conqueror. Immortus first appeared in Avengers issue 10, 2 issues after his past self Kang debuted in that series. He came to be when Kang grew weary of time travel and was frustrated at the loss of his son Marcus. Marcus is a dick, FYI. That's for another list though. He's approached by the extraterrestrial timekeepers, a group of time-traveling aliens who are from the end of the universe and are the last living creatures in existence. They ask him to work for them, preserving timelines rather than conquering them, and in exchange he'll be given immortality. Kang reinvents himself as Immortus and rules over the other dimensional realm of Limbo. Now it's worth noting that Immortus and Kang come from diverging timelines, so they are technically not the same guy, although technically they are. Alternate versions, woo!
Number 6. Electro 2099. The regular version of Electro is kind of lame. Sure, he has some good moments, but he's a hot dog with no condiments next to the chili cheese dog that is Electro 2099. Regular Electro looks like one of Santa's elves, but this guy is hardcore, walking around looking like an electrified skeleton. This Electro is actually an android who, after being deemed unnecessary by his creators, was given to these other guys who tortured him for science until his obedience chip burned out and he gained sentience. As you can imagine, after all of this, he's a pretty angry dude. He joins the Sinister Six in 2099 and is later recruited by Venture into the terrorist organization known as the Fist in the year 2016. He once captured Sonny Frisco after following him through Parker Industries and defeating Captain America along the way. He's later stopped by Spider-Man, who uses wooden shields to negate his electric powers and then capture Electro. Now, with Electro imprisoned in a lab, they trick him into revealing the date of the Fist's planned attack on New York City and then deactivate him. It's a pretty quick and sad end to an epic villain. who time travels.
Number 5, Maestro. In Avengers Endgame, we cut to 5 years in the future. Hulk is now smart, he's taking selfies, he's dabbing, he's hanging out with the team, but he's embarrassed by his past smashy version of himself in 2012's Avengers. We love growth, we love seeing a character change, but what if the Hulk had lived even longer on this planet? Well, that's where we get into the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect storyline. As the title suggests, the future is not so bright here. There are no flying cars, there's actually nothing really there. It's not a paradise at all. When we see the future Earth 9200, we're seeing a Hulk 100 years in the future as well. We find him after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction. So the Hulk, or rather the Maestro, was older, stronger, and scarier looking, all because he'd been absorbing all this nuclear radiation from the Earth. He became even more unstoppable and, of course, just super jaded, just super evil. He had to face a future version of Rick Jones at one point, and then he ended up losing a battle to said Smart Hulk as well. I wouldn't want to face any version of the Hulk at any time. I don't want to fight Smart Hulk, War Hulk, Horseman Hulk, or even Bruce Banner. I don't want to fight the scientist Bruce Banner.
Number 4, Nimrod. In an alternate future known as Days of Future Past, Sentinels rule over North America. The original Nimrod was built as an advanced prototype. He's a mutant hunting robot, built from technology derived from the original Sentinels. He follows Rachel Summers into the past and causes no end of trouble for the X-Men. Eventually, Nimrod is absorbed by the gigantic core Sentinel known as Master Mold, and the two travel together through a dimensional gateway that erases the identity of those who travel through it. So the two merge into a being called Bastion, a fully evolved Sentinel who has been destroyed and rebuilt using Nimrod's previous body several times. It's super weird and complicated like time travel stuff usually is, but personally I just can't get over the fact that his name is Nimrod.
Speaking of mutant hunting robots, up next number 3 is Nimrod. Nimrod is from the Days of Future Past timeline, derived from the technology of Sentinels. He is a doozy. This robot is pretty much indestructible, can shapeshift and teleport, interface with computers, project energy, and of course has superhuman strength, durability, and regeneration, the whole king caboodle. Created by Chris Claremont and John Romita Jr. in 1985, he would find his way into the present after following Rachel Summers, who was traveling backwards in time to present day. He's the most advanced form of a Sentinel, and can disguise himself to look human. He is capable of reconstructing himself to make improvements, constantly adapting and becoming more and more of a threat. And hey, he's strong enough to engage Juggernaut in hand-to-hand combat, so that is a lot.
Number 2, Professor Zoom. Arch nemesis to Barry Allen, the Flash, Professor Zoom is a time traveler who wants nothing more than to destroy everything the Flash has ever stood for. He is remarkably powerful with a brilliant mind and super speed. He's been affiliated with various groups, including the Secret Society of Supervillains. He is super nefarious, having gone back in time multiple times to get what he wants, even once preventing his own brother from being born. He was once in love with a reporter, but her eventual rejection left him so scorned that his future self went back in time and traumatized the reporter as a child, rendering her mute and causing her to be institutionalized. There are honestly many more examples of this guy's heartlessly evil ways, but I think you get the idea. This is one super evil time traveling jerk, and a perfect fit for the number 2 spot on this list.
And finally, number 1, Kang the Conqueror. Nathaniel Richards, making his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964, so old. Kang has seen many centuries. His powers allow him, of course, to travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with all these badass weapons to help him do so. That plus, of course, he's a super genius, which means it's a pretty stacked combo. Kind of OP, if you ask me. He was born in the 30th century of Earth 6311, which is a world where the Dark Ages never happened. Yeah, the time travel stuff doesn't come without consequence though, because as Kang travels more and more through time, he creates time-displaced duplicates, which are just so easy to keep track of. So we love those. Kang is on the way in the MCU as well, and he's being played by Jonathan Majors. And with the whole time variance authority stuff coming into play with the Loki show, things are gonna get so confusing. He actually once ruled over Egypt, believe it or not, as their new pharaoh, named himself Rama-Tut as well. He was actually there looking for another time-traveling baddie, and Sabanur, aka Apocalypse. Yeah, he wanted to make Apocalypse his hair, which is just a great thing to do, for sure. Spooky stuff. You don't want to mess around with this guy.
Number 10, Savior. Savior is a future version of Tim Drake who becomes Batman. Doesn't sound so villainous, right? Well, this future Bat version of Timothy Drake takes things a little too far, which is what makes him more villainous than heroic, despite taking up his own version of the cape and the cowl. Drake in the Titans Tomorrow reality is known by the vigilante codename of Savior, and has gone to extremes to do what he believes is right, meaning that Drake doesn't hold back and kills villains or even heroes who get in his way, eliminating them permanently. Drake and the world were seemingly transformed by a crisis event. In addition, Batman was also killed by Batwoman, which heavily shaped the life of Tim Drake in this reality, who would then do what he swore he would never do and continue on the Batman legacy in Bruce's place. Number 9. King Thanos. King Thanos is an alternate version of Thanos who hails from a pretty terrible future where he has successfully destroyed almost all life in the universe in an attempt to win the favor of Lady Death. In this universe, Frank Castle also becomes Ghost Rider after being killed and then making a deal to become Ghost Rider, returning to Earth in an attempt to avenge the fallen heroes of Earth, only to return too late, with Earth pretty much being decimated by Thanos already. As Ghost Rider, Castle lost his mind from loneliness, but would later have no other choice left but to become the Herald of King Thanos. King Thanos actually has a few people left to kill and needs help, so he actually sends Cosmic Ghost Rider, aka Frank Castle, back in time for a younger version of himself to basically help him in his final battle.
Number 8. Timothy Drake. The Red Robin, aka Tim Drake, first entered comics in Batman 436. He was a young boy who saw the Flying Graysons show live in person. He even received kind words from Dick Grayson, and Dick dedicated that act to Tim that night. How lovely. Now, of course, this was moments before Dick's parents, John and Mary, tragically died during this act. A night Tim would never forget, especially when he witnessed the Cape Crusader himself, Batman, consoling Dick Grayson afterwards. So years later, when Tim was 9, it was Batman and Robin taking down the Penguin, and Robin did this quadruple somersault, the only flip that could be performed by a Grayson, and then he connected the dots. He's like, oh, so you're him and you're him. Got it. Tim followed them around for a while, and then after Jason's death, Tim suited up himself as the third Robin. But in the Titans Tomorrow storyline, we see the Teen Titans travel to the 31st century to assist the Legion of Superheroes, and when they return, they accidentally end up 10 years in their future. So they meet older, darker future versions of themselves, including Timothy Drake, now going by Savior. This version of Tim is ruthless. He even carries around with him Joe Chill's gun to help get the job done. So when the team gets back to their real timeline, they swear to never become their dark counterparts, and they split up. But, like I said earlier, this split up is actually what ends up causing the dark versions of themselves to happen in the first place. Time! You can't mess with time. That's it. The Titans Tomorrow storyline is definitely one you need to check out. We love dark, evil versions of our heroes. We can't get enough of them.
And number 7, Deadpool. Yes, Wade Wilson kills the Marvel Universe, and it is gloriously glory and gory. Deadpool of Earth 12101, that is. So this issue was released August 2012, and I mean, just the front cover, you know you want to take a peek in. So what's the story here? Well, the X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to, heal his insanity, but of course the Doctor wasn't too good at handling such a task from such a man. The Doctor being Psycho Man, of course. So yeah, he brainwashed Wade in hopes to shut down all of his inner voices, and it worked. But the only downside, those voices were now replaced with other voices, and these ones were encouraging him to, well, of course, kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. Love it. It's like when you get a song stuck in your head, but it's like, kill everyone in the Marvel. You know how that goes. So right off the bat, the series pulls you in, right? It opens up with the Fantastic Four facing off with Wade. And he kind of kills them all. Like Reed Richards' face is all rubbery, it's like melting. Sue has to watch Deadpool kill Johnny before meeting her own demise. And that's just the first few pages alone. Then the Watcher ends up taking us back to the beginning and how it all started with Dr. Psycho and all that jazz. So it's fun, you get a little peek at what happens and then you wrap it back in time. Kind of like a little Tarantino flick. And it's honestly a really fun run. It's not for the faint of heart, but definitely fun.
Number 6, Reverse Flash. Eobard Thawne made his debut in Flash issue 139, titled The Black Flash. He was the OG Reverse Flash. He was born in 2451 when his parents genetically engineered him, because that's the thing you do in the future, and you can engineer your kids to look and be funny and cute, I guess. Okay, cool. But he lacked the social skills in this time to make his parents truly proud, so they decided, you know what, another son may be the key. A new best friend, great idea, they can pair up and talk and be friends and stuff. Okay, cool. I grew up with siblings, I get it. That second son's name was Robert. He spent so much time trying to keep an eye on Robert and to make his parents proud and to like babysit him, that down the road his application to study the Speed Force at the Flash Museum was rejected. He was too busy, couldn't even study. So he studied it illegally. But he was caught by his brother, who is now an officer in the science police. This guy is interesting and a little confusing. So a future version of Eobard traveled through time and prevented his brother from being born, and then he was able to study and was in turn this time around admitted to the Flash Museum. Great. But then when Professor Drake was on the verge of proving the existence of the Speed Force, Eobard has trained his whole life for this, so he wanted to collab, but Drake said no. He wanted to do it solo. So he traveled back in time again and eliminated Professor Drake from the equation. So next time around, there's no Drake, there's no problem. Now Eobard is the professor at the Flash Museum and was nicknamed Professor Zoom. Reverse Flash is responsible for the death of Barry Allen's mother and his wife Iris West. He just rips timelines and the Flash's life to pieces. That's his whole thing.
Up next at 5, Maestro. Maestro is a terrifying future version of the Hulk who first appeared in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect issue 1 in 1992. He is the product of a nuclear war that pretty much wiped out most of Earth's superhumans, leaving the rest of the globe on the brink of extinction. But Maestro doesn't need to worry about dying. He survived the blast and the radiation, although he has the latter to thank for becoming insane. His bitterness towards the rest of the world has been amplified, and he rules over this future world, having collected relics of previous superpowered individuals as if they were trophies. All in all, he's evil as hell, and is exactly the nightmarish version of the Hulk that many in the Marvel Universe hope will never see the light of day in the main continuity, even though he technically did appear in the main continuity. But like, you know, as a bigger threat to like the entire universe, not just Bruce Banner.
Number 4, Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, Time Trapper was introduced to readers as a warlord in the far future who prevents the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future with this iron curtain of time. The Time Trapper's main goal basically was to steal this weapon that could absorb every energy in the universe, just this Dyson vacuum full of energy called the Concentrator. Now the team caught wind of this Time Trapper when they could no longer jump more than 30 days in the future. They're like, okay, something's up, there's some higher powers preventing us from being badass. He resides comfortably at the end of time, accompanied by his servants, the Glorith of Baldur. Time Trapper can age anybody he wants, either a couple years or straight to the ashes and bones part. In Action Comics 385, Time Trapper created a temporal force barrier in order to seal a time-traveling Superman away from the 20th century. He's that powerful. Number 3, Gore. So it was recently announced that the God Butcher himself will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder movie. So I figured this would be a good time to play catch up and see what to expect. Gore made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. Born on a planet with no name, always a great sign, Gore lost his parents at a very young age and was told to pray to the gods, because they would always make things better, you know how gods be. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. So now he's a little upset at said gods, and he wants them to pay. And with the all-black Necro Sword powers, he headed out for revenge. Now, this sword is a pretty big deal. It was actually built by Null, the almighty symbiote god, and he took out a lot of gods with it, all but of course, Thor. We got Gore Thor and Thor 4. So he uses the Pool of Forever to make his time travel attacks on the gods and stay ahead of the game. He also used it to travel back in time before the universe to kill a baby elder god, little baby boy elder god, and then steal its heart. Sick. Then he used it to go ahead in time to the future to Earth 14412, and I hope the MCU doesn't do too much time travel here because my head already hurts with these new timelines coming in. Can't even keep track. What's going on? Number 2, Chronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time. But if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and then maybe you just won't get caught next time. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer, aka the Atom. Now he was a criminal his entire life, and finally, when he was arrested, he was thrown in the slammer, where he had time to think about everything that he's done, all the reasons why he got caught, why his plans didn't work. But maybe he had a bit too much time. He reflected on his past crimes and what he would have done differently if he had planned it better, and then he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop, where he learned about clocks, time, the mechanisms within. He learned about everything. So when his sentence was finally up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used all these time-inspired weapons, like an exploding hourglass, a wristwatch with blades instead of hands, and a device that could slow time down. Going by the new name Kronos, in the DC animated universe, Kronos used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point, he actually tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's Watchtower, but when he was interrupted, he made a break for it through the time vortex, and Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back. Not this time, Kronos. Literally, not this time. Maybe the next one. And finally, number 1, Kang. Kang the Conqueror. As Loki gets closer to wrapping up, we're starting to see some higher powers at play here. The Time Lords were just androids. Loki was banished to a realm full of other Lokis. We're not really sure who's calling the shots yet, but signs are pointing to Kang. Jonathan Majors is already set to play the time-traveling villain in the next Ant-Man film, so let's do a quick refresh on him. Kang the Conqueror, aka Nathaniel Richards, made his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964. Kang has seen many centuries. He can travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with weapons that can take on any superhero from any timeline that he chooses. He's super powerful, and it sure helps when he travels with armies. That often does a trick. So he discovered time travel tech from the 31st century developed by Dr. Doom, and being a descendant of Reed Richards with that brain power, he figured out a way to make it work to his advantage. He traveled back in time initially to become Pharaoh Rama-Tut, but once he returned to his 31st century, it was now just a wasteland. So he figured, okay, now I'm going to go all the way back and just rule Earth to prevent said destruction from happening. I feel like Kang is one episode away. We're so close. I can feel it in my soul.
Number 10, Cable. Cable is not only dangerous to others he comes up against as a hero, but he's even dangerous to himself. Cable is a badass from the future who is taken there in his youth to protect him and ensure his survival. He has since made his way all across and through time, and has even returned to the present from the future, which is his past. Yeah, it's a lot of time travel stuff. It can get a little confusing. When Cable dies, it isn't even because anyone else took him out either, and he even saw it coming, because it turns out that his younger self was the one responsible, a version of the character we often refer to as young Cable or Kid Cable. So yeah, Cable is deadly in the sense that he'll do whatever he needs to, even if it means ending his own time loop by killing his older self. Does that make sense? I hope what I said just made sense. I think it made sense. Number 9, Old Woman Laura. X-23's future self ends up in a much nicer alternate future reality than her genetic father Wolverine. Old Man Logan's reality? Wasteland, lots of death and people who have gone insane, cannibalism. Old Woman Laura's reality? A sort of futuristic paradise where Kamala Khan ends up as president. But even still, her future isn't perfect, because Laura is dying. Her genes have become unstable in her old age due to a flaw in the cloning process that made her. Not so good. The other thing that's not so good, Doom is holding the people of Latveria hostage, and it's up to Laura to put a stop to it. This version of Laura from the future is just as deadly as her main continuity counterpart, but with added years of experience, and is willing to do whatever it takes to defeat Doom, even if it means killing him and possibly sacrificing herself to do it.
Number 8, Kronos. Kronos is a somewhat confusing character in DC continuity because there are multiple versions of him. And this confusion isn't entirely the fault of alternate futures or time travel either. It's actually more to do with the trajectory of the DC main continuity. Kronos, not to be confused with Kronos, no H, back in the New Earth continuity was known to be a clock-obsessed villain of Ray Palmer's Captain Atom. However, his clock obsession would soon develop into an obsession to perfect the means of time travel, and this obsession would translate to his Prime Earth continuity counterpart, who is an agent of Argus specializing in, you guessed it, time travel. There is also another version of Kronos, which is an entirely different person, Walker Gabriel, who found Clinton's tech and then more used it to become an anti-hero instead of like a full-blown villain. Number 7, Savior. Savior is the future version of Tim Drake from the Titans Tomorrow alternate reality. Here, Tim Drake ended up taking on the mantle of Batman, but would eventually become known as the vigilante Savior. You might be thinking, but Tim Drake is a good guy. He's not evil. What are you talking about? And normally, you'd be right. But in this reality, Tim doesn't end up quite as heroic as the main counterpart had hoped he'd grow up to be.
Fleet. This version of Tim comes to us from a much darker timeline, one where everything got so bad that he and his fellow Titans, known as actually one of the two different opposing Titans teams in the future, ended up adopting a zero-tolerance policy for criminals. Eventually, this future version of Tim Drake even ends up wielding the gun used to kill Martha and Thomas Wayne in his fight for vengeance. Basically, he becomes OG Batman, but even darker. Number 6. Monarch. Monarch is another villain from the future who actually, it turns out, was originally a hero. I love these reveals, especially when you are the hero finding out that you become the villain. Gasp. Monarch is actually Hank Hall, who ends up becoming a villain in a dystopian future after his partner Dove dies. For those who don't know, Hank Hall is the hero Hawk of the superhero duo Hawk and Dove. Hank wouldn't be the only hero to become known as the future villain Monarch. In fact, it seems likely much of the villainy behind Monarch comes from the suit that Hank and later Captain Atom wear while donning that mantle. In fact, in the case of Captain Atom, it seems the suit is very much to blame here. Suit making people evil and crazy.
Halfway through into number 5, Technarchy. We all love a good alien invader storyline. They always give us ideas of what to do and what not to do if we ever end up in the same situation making first contact. However, in Marvel's 2099 series, one race of aliens known as the Technarchy is not only a badass name, but the absolute pure definition of demonic cyberpunk, and I think that at this point you can see why. This race of aliens are cybernetic, shape-shifting, and giant techno-organic entities that love violence as all higher life forms do. They were created by the Phalanx, another alien race, but since they love violence, they also hate their creators just for the sake of it. It's so bad in fact that they don't even consider them their creators, and rather just a sucky version of their own species. Yeah, these aliens are racist. And they can also infect organic beings with a techno-organic virus that turns organic matter into technology that I'm guessing they then consume. This is actually insane, but they're my new favorite alien race.
Number 4. Extant. The thing about time-traveling characters is that you can have a few different versions of them, whether that be in one single timeline or across multiple timelines. In the case of Extant though, we are fortunately keeping things pretty linear thus far on this list. Extant is actually the name that Hank Hall took up after his Monarch persona, and if you thought Monarch was bad, Hank Hall's Extant is arguably worse. Extant is Monarch, but now not only advanced, but with the ability to time travel. He teams up with Hal Jordan's Parallax, and the two villains plan to take control of time itself so that they might manipulate it as they so desire, altering reality itself. Number 3. Monarch. Monarch was actually revealed to be Hawk of Hawk and Dove, aka Hank Hall. But before we knew that, we simply knew Monarch as a tyrant ruling in a futuristic post-apocalyptic world. It turned out the death of Dove was what had prompted him to turn villain. Though, surprise surprise, Hank would later learn it was him himself from the future as Monarch who was responsible for killing Dove in the past. Gasp. Hawk would eventually go on to take up another villainous mantle, becoming known as Extant. As Extant, or Extant, Hank would team up with former Green Lantern Hal Jordan, now known as Parallax, during the events of Zero Hour. So yeah, pretty mega bad. Hal and Hank together plan to manipulate time in order to alter reality, making it as they wanted it to be. You know, if you're doing that, you're probably in the wrong. Number 2. Professor Zoom. Professor Zoom is Eobard Thawne, the main villain of Barry Allen's The Flash, who traveled back in time just to mess with the Flash's life. That's how much he hates him. He has also been known as Reverse Flash before in the comics. Eobard Thawne hails from the future of the 25th century in DC Comics. Being a very fast speedster powered by the negative speed force, there is much that Eobard can do and accomplish as a villain. Aside from traveling back in time and to other dimensions, he can use his super speed to not only be super fast, but also be super powerful in battle, as his speed also inherently gives him super strength. He also possesses the ability to heal and the ability to manipulate molecules, allowing him to phase through things. Despite being a villain in the New Earth continuity, Thawne even used his molecular manipulation powers at one point to save the DC universe, which I think makes you pretty powerful in my mind. Number 1. Kang the Conqueror. While Kang might look a little silly in the comics with his, his purple helmet and his floating time chair, he is not someone someone who should be underestimated. Kang hails from the 30th century, where he is believed to either be the descendant of Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, or Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards. He is known as Nathaniel Richards in his original future reality of Earth 6311, where he hails from. In fact, a young Nathaniel Richards would go on to become Iron Lad while running from his future self Kang, only to learn that he actually needed to become Kang, or would actually kind of risk the destruction of time and the multiverse itself. That is maybe the most powerful element of Kang. He's like a Marvel absolute, and even though young Nathaniel wanted to become a hero and in essence defeat Kang, he had to accept his destiny or risk destroying multiple universes that have been shaped by a version of Kang and his actions. Kang is basically like integral. You don't have Kang, everything dies, but if you have Kang in the reality, he's probably gonna try to mess with you. It's like, there's no good answer to Kang.
Starting us off in at number 10, Galactus, the Butcher of Worlds. The immensity of Galactus is already scary to some readers as is, but this famous Marvel antagonist has been depicted over the years in alternate universes to have some of the most terrifying aesthetics and dispositions outside his already overwhelming original persona. Galactus, the Butcher of Worlds is one of those alternate identities from a future timeline. From Earth 14412, appearing as part of the Marvel Now line in Thor God of Thunder issue 19, this Black Galactus has Thor to thank for his transformation. As the story goes, a millennia into the future, after the Earth has died out, Galactus returns to consume the planet. But Thor, now King Thor, is still kicking around and protecting Midgard. He gets nostalgic about Earth and fights Galactus, preventing him from consuming the planet. In the process, Thor uses the all-black Necrosword, which was previously used by Gore the God Butcher, and Galactus retreats, eating Mars instead. Except now the Necrosword has manifested itself inside of him, which drastically changes him into this. In at number 9, Kang the Conqueror. Kang the Conqueror is largely known for his time-traveling shenanigans, and perhaps is the first villain that comes to mind when you think of comic time travelers. Now, because of his time traveling, we've seen multiple iterations of him over the years, including the most recent Iron Lad. Created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Kang is a fellow named Nathaniel Richards, a 31st century scholar who has a genius level intellect and is an expert in history. He's also possibly a descendant of Reed Richards, and becomes fascinated by time travel technology created by Dr. Doom. He decides to travel back in time and becomes a pharaoh, and the Fantastic Four, who were time displaced at that time, a lot of time, defeated him. Then, a year later, he appeared in the Avengers issue 8, now fully as Kang, and got into a kerfuffle with the team. Armed with 40th century technology, he's got armor that enhances his strength, he has energy, force field, and hologram projection abilities, his suit has 30 days of food and air supplies, and he can control other forms of technology. Also, he's super resistant to radiation, which probably comes in handy in the future. The Earth is dying.
Number 8, Ravonna, aka Terminatrix. Okay, Ravonna Renslayer made her first appearance in Marvel Comics with Avengers issue 23. She was the daughter of King Carillius, a ruler in the 40th century. It was the last civilization that wasn't conquered by Kang at this point, but Kang spared them because he caught feelings for Ravonna. Can't help it, you gotta follow the heart. She refused to share the love because he wasn't royalty, but he was determined to win her over. He was so determined that he summoned the Avengers to that timeline just to fight them and embarrass them, and then in turn impress her. Now it worked because in the following issue, when everybody's making a run for it, she can't leave him. Kang knows even this is a bad idea, but love is love, baby, you gotta do what you gotta do. So if he marries Ravonna, Baltag will go against him with Kang's troops, and Baltag did do this. And when he attacked Kang, Ravonna jumped in the way using her last breath to tell Kang she indeed loves him. Cut to Avengers issue 267, Prime Kang was able to go back in time and save her. He altered reality so another version of him died instead of Ravonna. How sweet / confusing. Ravonna's awesome. We get to see her in Loki, and I'm really hoping we get her alternate side as well, the Terminatrix. She's much more of a big deal than the show has revealed yet. She once disguised herself as Nebula in order to infiltrate the Council of Cross-Time Kangs. She's kind of a big deal.
Number 7, Dr. Doom. Weirdly enough, in a way, Dr. Doom is also a villain from the future, as he does like to travel back to the past to enact some villainous plots. He traveled back in time to study with Morgan Le Fay, and he's also gone back in time as well with Iron Man to the period of Arthurian legend. One of his most iconic plots in my mind as well was when he wanted to use the Fantastic Four to help him steal Blackbeard's treasure by traveling back in time and recovering it, which seems like a really easy way to possibly mess up the timeline for a reward that somehow, I don't know, it doesn't really seem worth all that trouble. I know it's a chest of treasure, Doom, historical pirate treasure no less, but is it really worth possibly changing the future for? And messing with time? I don't know.
Number 6. Chronarch. Not to be confused with the 64th century ruler from DC Comics, Chronarch was once a regular man, and he first appeared in Defenders Volume 2, Issue 12. He was a janitor working for a research group who, of course, spilled something that changed his life forever. He spilled something on the Chronoscepter, so in turn it opened up this time vortex, and out came, you guessed it, dinosaurs. Yeah, dinosaurs that he could control. So yeah, I had to include this villain. This guy is nuts. The Chronarch then made a cool suit of armor, of course, to fit the whole theme. And then he set up a camp in an abandoned theme park and ran operations until the Defenders showed up to save the day. Now, I'm upset here because the Defenders sent the dinosaurs back to their time, their Doom timeline, which we all know, instead of just opening a Jurassic Park. Come on guys, think, profit. Come on, you're Marvel, you're Disney, you like money, do this.
Number 5. Zoom. Zoom might not be a villain who is from the future, but he is a villain who could potentially access it and who has gone back to the past, therefore being from the future at that point, to mess about with Wally West's life. Hunter Zolomon was once a good friend and colleague of Wally West's. He had a rough life, and after Wally refused to help him by going back in time and reversing a severe injury of Hunter's, he'd lost the ability to walk and was basically now confined to a wheelchair. Hunter decided he needed to step up and help Wally become the hero he was meant to be. Hunter actually has twisted but ultimately altruistic intentions at heart. His goal is to make Wally's life miserable and give him a more tragic backstory so that Wally would end up being a better hero in the future, more inclined to help other people with their problems because he would understand them better. Of course, the reason the Flash did not decide to help Hunter is because he knew how dangerous messing with the time stream was. He was like, we can't just do that. But to Hunter, who had suffered throughout his life, he didn't see that as the real reason behind Wally wouldn't help. He was like, nah, that's not what it is, it's just you don't get it. Let me go make your life miserable and then you'll get it. You're welcome.
Number 4. Czar. Spider-Man and Wolverine, the Dream Team, involved in a pretty intense storyline. The 2010 six-parter written by Jason Aaron begins with the Orb robbing a bank, which I gotta say would be the weirdest and scariest deposit ever. Spider-Man and Wolverine are on the scene and things seem manageable at first, but when a bag of stolen glowing diamonds hits the ground, the daring duo are transported 60 million years back in time. Wolverine knows after taking one breath that this is not Savage Land. Now they're hanging out and an asteroid is heading for Earth. So much later, when Peter has now grown a beard in this altered timeline, Wolverine is also leading the group, the Small Folk. The diamonds activate again, and this time they're shot into the future. What is going on? Okay, so in issue 2, the Orb asks Peter about the diamonds. These diamonds belong to the Tsar. He had them attached to his teeth, real fashionable, real gangster-like. He also has a bat with those diamonds embedded in them. So he has arguably the most dangerous weapon I've ever seen. A bat with time-traveling diamonds sticking out of them. Okay, RIP. His sidekick, Big Murder, was also pretty fashionable. He rocks the Kanye glasses while commuting through the cosmos. It's a pretty good duo. I would never want to fight these guys in any reality, especially not the future.
Number 3. Immortus. Immortus is one of the most powerful enemies of the Avengers, who was actually revealed to simply be an alternate path that the villain Kang the Conqueror could have chosen. Because there is so much time travel in Kang's past, there are a lot of alternate reality versions and versions from future and past timelines floating around that sometimes even come into conflict with each other, in addition to also fighting heroes along the way. Immortus is one such alternate Kang self. Lord Immortus is what Kang would become while choosing to ally himself with the Timekeepers. He is virtually immortal, using advanced technology to dramatically slow the appearance of aging, and often spends his time traveling through it, fixing various issues with the timelines and maintaining them, which of course grants him a lot of power. Eventually, Immortus would be killed, but even after his supposed death, his corpse still played a key role in a few different plots. So even when Immortus was dead, he was still doing stuff, apparently.
Number 2. Ultron. Making his first appearance in Avengers issue 54, Ultron in the comics was originally made by Dr. Hank Pym, but of course he became sentient and turned into a big brass bully. Ultron in the MCU wasn't nearly as cool as the comics, specifically the Age of Ultron storyline from 2013. The story opens up with the world gone dark. Spider-Man is kidnapped by a gang, Hawkeye performs a daring rescue, and then the two then meet up with the rest of the Avengers, or rather, the remaining Avengers ever. That's it. This future is dark and riddled with Ultron drones. Population is running real low. It's a stressful time. Ultron is ahead of the game here. Literally, he uses vision as a conduit to communicate with the past. He resides in the future comfortably and remains a ruler. This is one of my all-time favorite comics. The team goes back in time to talk to Pym, but Logan has other messy intentions. It's a ride, you must check it out.
Finally, in at number 1, Kang the Conqueror. You knew it was gonna happen. Nathaniel Richards was born in the 30th century of Earth 6311, a reality where humanity never went into the Dark Ages. After centuries of advancement in warfare, peace was brought to the land by a time traveler from Earth 616 named Nathaniel Richards. Because Richards brought peace to this war-torn future, he was known as a legend. The Nathaniel Richards born to this reality, though, is said to be a distant descendant of Reed Richards, although other records also indicate that he may be a descendant of the Latvian monarch known as Dr. Doom. Or maybe some of the shippers are right after all. At the age of 16, intervention from his future self as Kang the Conqueror resulted in a young Nathaniel trying to prevent his eventual transformation into Kang the Conqueror, briefly becoming the young hero known as Iron Lad. The kid also briefly had a stint as a supervillain known as Kid Immortus. Basically, there are infinite versions of this character and all of them seem to have some form of beef. This is supposed to be the next main villain of the MCU apparently, and hot damn, is this about to get crazy, as I'm sure you can already tell.
Number 10, Clock King number 2. Clock King the Second? There have been a few Clock Kings over the years, and even in fact 2 Clock Kings the Seconds. There's been 2 of those, if you can believe that. The one we're talking about here, however, is the Clock King who is associated with the Terror Titans. This DC villain wasn't necessarily from the future, but did have precognitive abilities that linked him to the future. He could see close to 5 seconds in the future if you're rounding up. He would use his precognitive abilities to predict his enemies' moves and reactions, making him a fairly formidable villain, at least in comparison to some of the other Clock Kings who are really just guys obsessed with clocks and time. Number 9, New 52 Clock King. Yep, we never gonna talk about Clock King, which means you know I'm gonna try and shine a spotlight on him here. Clock King's pretty cool. Despite him being kind of a weird villain originally, Clock King has actually had multiple versions, and that's just in the comics. He's also had live action and even animated versions of himself, despite being kind of an odd duck, at least to begin with. Sometimes referred to as Clock King III in terms of his overall appearances, but actually the first Clock King to have appeared in the New 52 continuity, this version is probably the most powerful version of the character. Well, it's kind of a toss-up between this version and the previous one that I just talked about, so you could decide for yourself who you think is more powerful, but I think this one's just a little bit more powerful. Initially, it appears as though he can actually manipulate time, sending people back through their own time stream. But later we learned that he actually employs hallucinogenic gas simply to make it seem like he's doing that. However, I'm not really super convinced on that. I'm sure hallucinations are involved in some way, but how do you make someone specifically hallucinate moments of their past? I guess perhaps through suggestion? Just seems a little suspicious. This version of Clock King appeared in the first issue of the 2016 Deathstroke series, and also reappeared in the Deathstroke Rebirth comic. Basically, if you're a villain and you face off with Deathstroke, I feel like you're pretty cool, and I feel like you deserve a place on a powerful list. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about cool time-traveling future villains, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Magistrate. Initially, the Magistrate was thought of as a figurehead for some dark and sinister organization prior to Future State comics being released, and based on the synopses that we got for that event / comic line. However, once we finally got into the future state of Gotham and got the comics, we learned that Magistrate was actually more a paramilitary force which had taken hold over Gotham. And now in the current run of Batman, it's made to seem like the Magistrate was actually a program launched by Simon Saint to help Gotham fight against crime and masked vigilantes, good or bad alike. Either way, the Magistrate is definitely a frightening antagonist, especially in the sense that it's not one that you can directly hit, as it's not a physical character, but more of an idea or concept that needs to be dismantled.
And it's 7, Kron Stone. Kron Stone is actually the son of Tyler Stone, and the older half-brother of Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, as revealed later on in his series. Kron became a violent person after years of suffering not at the hands of his father, but rather an android housekeeper. Yeah, this dude thought their robot maid was so bad that he went nuts and ended up killing Punisher 2099's family, the Gallows family. This was also before gaining superpowers, since after nearly getting killed by Jake Gallows, the Punisher of 2099, Kron fell into a sewer and floated into this strange black ball. This black ball was somehow the mutated form of the Venom symbiote that had survived without a host for all this time, I guess. The symbiote bonded with Kron and they became Venom 2099. This new version of Venom had also gained acidic blood and saliva, so that's a pretty gnarly power right there. So safe to say Venom 2099 is a pretty futuristic version of the symbiote, especially if you look at him. Hot damn.
Number 6. Brother Eye. Brother Eye isn't necessarily a villain who exists exclusively in the future, but in Future's End, it is an entity that takes over the world, so I feel like we can count it for that fact. Also, Brother Eye is pretty future-y in terms of its concept. Brother Eye was initially created to be a hero, protecting the world from any threat. In Future's End, the artificial intelligence was created by Batman and Mr. Terrific, but its prime directive ended up kinda corrupting it. Brother Eye came to realize that humanity's greatest threat was actually humanity itself, and sought for complete control over the people of planet Earth, seeing this as the only way to protect them from themselves. It's that age-old AI warning story. Be careful what you wish for, or one day AI technology may just rise up and realize how awful you really are and either hold you prisoner for the rest of your life or just kill you. You know the one. Number 5. Nimrod. Nimrod has become even more intense in the last few years, managing to make the overall silly sounding name of Nimrod strike fear into the hearts of mutants and X-Men fans everywhere. Nimrod, despite actually often being associated with the idea of someone being inept here in North America, is actually a word in a literary sense that can mean a skillful hunter, which actually makes it, I think, a very fitting name for Nimrod. But yeah, I didn't know that even until I was writing this, and then I was like, oh. Does sound silly though, ya Nimrod. Skillful hunter is definitely what Nimrod themselves has become associated with in terms of all the crazy stuff they've done. The Nimrod of Days of Future Past, Earth 811, is a type of sentinel that originally traveled back in time to fulfill its mission of destroying the X-Men. In a past future viewed in Powers of X, we also learned that Nimrod has the potential to be the end of mutant kind and humankind as we know it. Humans basically become tools to be used by Nimrod to destroy mutants, and mutants are all but extinct in this future. Number 4. Savitar from the Arrowverse. This villain is actually a time remnant of Barry Allen and is a combination of the comic book versions of Savitar and Future Flash. Savitar is what ends up happening to Barry Allen if he decides to go down a much darker path. Being spurned by his friends, Team Flash, he instead sets out to become the very thing that ruined his own life. He becomes obsessed with power and aims to become a god. Savitar looks super futuristic and could be considered to be even more powerful than the main continuity version of Barry Allen from CW's The Flash. Savitar also possesses the artifact known as the Philosopher's Stone, made out of pure Speed Force energy. The Philosopher's Stone grants Savitar additional powers and rule over alterations made to reality. With it, he additionally becomes a powerful telepath.
Getting close to the end into number 3, Electro 2099. You want futuristic villains? One look at Electro 2099 and you'll be ruining your pants in more ways than one. Electro 2099's origin is the most future thing you could get, with his original form being a robot construction worker. But this robot's creators became frustrated and unsatisfied with his work, so they sent him to a robot torture experimenter. Yeah, this is starting to sound an awful lot like my trigger and I don't like that. But the torture this android went through, however, broke his obedience chip, and as such the laws of robotics went out the window. This android then gained sentience and the ability to harness and siphon electrical energy, turning him into the new Electro. He also ended up joining the 2099 version of the Sinister Six. This is absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, why would you send a robot who isn't doing their job properly to be tortured? Why would you just not fix their coding or whatever it is in 2099? This is why AI is a bad idea. I'm telling you. However, he does look badass.
Number 2. Reverse Flash. One of the most powerful villains out there when it comes to villains from the future is Reverse Flash, aka Eobard Thawne. This villain has found a special kind of way to torment his arch nemesis Barry Allen, and even hurt him so much that Barry at one point killed him out of fear of what he would do to those that he loved. That's how much Reverse Flash had messed him up. We'd also learn later on that Eobard was responsible for one of the most tragic and pivotal moments in Barry's life, the death of his mom, Nora Allen. Many people for years believed it was Barry's father who had committed the crime, causing even more grief for young Barry and his family throughout his life. Number 1. Time Trapper. He's a time trap. Or she. depending on which story you're reading in regards to this character's true identity. Multiple true identities over here. Time Trapper has been implied to be a few different people when it comes to their true identity. One of the more notable folks who has been the implied true identity of the villain is Superboy Prime. If that was true, or I guess when that was true perhaps I should say, then that would make Time Trapper pretty crazy powerful, both strength-wise and of course power-wise as well. The Time Trapper throughout the years has been shown to have crazy control over time. They can block time travel, manipulate someone else's time stream, aging them prematurely for example, and can even take entire planets out of time, slicing pieces of that time off to capture them for their own use. It's been theorized by Brainiac 5 that what Time Trapper really may be is a sentient alternate timeline, forever in a constant battle or struggle with the main one.